Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. There was a Kentucky basketball story that we got to go ahead and address, and it involves a lot of what we just talked about, right? Is that it has been an awesome offseason for Mark Pope. I think it's been an awesome 18 months since the day he took the job. Takes the job, puts together a roster. I was higher on them than most. It doesn't really matter because once the season starts, they start kicking butt and taking names. They beat Duke basically on opening night. They beat Gonzaga. They beat whoever, Florida in the opener of the season. They sweep Tennessee in the regular season. They have a great season at Kentucky. It ends in the Sweet 16, second weekend since 2019. Everybody's feeling good. Yet as good as Mark Pope's regular season was, I think the offseason's been even better, okay? He obviously had a lot of resources at his disposal. We just talked about rev share, divvy, and whatever, and this was obviously, in theory, the last uncapped year of NIL. And so I just bring it up because he had a lot of money to spend, and he put together a roster that I believe is good enough to compete for a national championship. Mo Diabate, Denzel Aberdeen, Jalen Lowe, Otega Owe, Brandon Garrison, Malachi Moreno, Jasper Johnson. The list goes on and on. The team is deep. It's stacked. It's loaded. By the way, I missed some guys. Don't get mad at me if I forgot somebody important. Oh, by the way, Jaden Quayens, who might be a top 10 pick a year from now. So I bring it up because the roster is stacked. The resources are there. And I think Mark Pope has a team good enough to win the national championship in his second year. Now, why that's interesting is because over the weekend, apparently there are coaches that have basically decided if Kentucky doesn't win a national championship, given everything that Mark Pope had at his disposal this offseason, then he's kind of a failure as far as other SEC coaches are concerned. Okay, so interesting story from my buddy Jacob Polachek, Kentucky Sports Radio. Now, this was on the KSR Plus page, so I don't know anything outside of what was posted on Twitter, and I certainly don't share stuff from behind paywalls. But Jacob Polachek tweeting out from his account, quote, new story on KSR Plus. Several SEC coaches talked anonymously about Kentucky's 2025-26 roster. Quote, it's national championship or bust when you're paying double, triple, or quadruple what everybody else in the country is paying. Okay. So first of all, don't know who has too much sodium in their diet because that is a lot of salt and a lot of shade being thrown at Kentucky basketball. But I do think it's an interesting quote, and I do think it's an interesting conversation to have. So let's go ahead and dive in. First off, the first thing that comes to mind when I see that quote, we actually did a segment on is it national championship or bust for Kentucky at some point in the summer. Now, I think it was funny because with Kentucky fans, there was two different ways in which they approached that. One, they basically said, this is Kentucky. We always have national championship or bust expectations. And then I think there were others that were like, listen, we always expect to win at the highest level, but saying national championship or bust is just a stupid way to approach things. And a stupid way to approach a season. Now, I'm never going to tell a fan how to feel about their team. And certainly the stakes are as high at Kentucky as they are anywhere. The one thing that I will say that does stand out to me about those quotes from those Kentucky fans or from those SEC coaches, I kind of lean with I think I don't ever want to say if you feel like it's national championship or bust, you have the wrong opinion. I do think it's a little bit unfair sometimes. And it's funny, like to me, I always say this, it's about the journey, not the destination. So what do I mean by that? Okay. So I'll give you an example. I was on a radio interview about a week ago in Utah with a BYU station. Okay. Actually, it was a BYU and Utah station, another conversation. But they basically asked me, they said, BYU has never made a Final Four in school history. We've only made, I think, one Elite Eight. They didn't say I think. I'm saying I think. And so they basically asked me, they said, so Torres, if we don't at least make the Elite Eight, is the season considered a failure? Is it Elite Eight, Final Four, or bust? And I said, well, look, there are two ways to look at it. What if you go 31-2, 29-2 during the regular season, and you're the number one team in the country, and you win the Big 12, and you're the number one overall seed in the tournament? and then something super weird happens and you lose in the Sweet 16. Like, does that mean the season was a failure? I mean, it'd be a disappointment. I don't know if you'd call it a failure when you won 30 plus games, won the Big 12 regular season, Big 12 tournament. And I said, conversely, I said, imagine the opposite. Imagine you make that Elite Eight, but you're kind of 19-12 in the regular season, losing the opening round of the Big 12 tournament. Team doesn't play well, a lot of weird losses, disappointing season. Then you somehow get hot in March. Does that make the season somehow more enjoyable? So, like, I'm always a journey, not the destination kind of guy. And I do think it's a little ridiculous to say anything is national championship or bust. And again, I'll let Kentucky fans tell me if that's fair or not. But my counter to that is basically like, I don't necessarily see it. What I will say, though, it is very clear, and I think even Mark Pope would say this, expectations have certainly changed going into year two, okay? Year one, it was feel good. It was, get this thing back to where it was, get Kentucky back to being Kentucky, all those cliches. But at the end of the day, like, the goals are still to win national championships. And to Mark Pope's credit, like, he gets that. What is his famous quote? I understand the assignment. I know my job is to put number 9 in this building, the 9th national championship for Kentucky basketball. And if I don't, y'all are going to find somebody who can. And so the thing about this season, the pressure is definitely ramped up, but I don't think it's pressure on Mark Pope because I think he knows the day-to-day pressure of being the Kentucky basketball coach because he lived it for a couple of years as a basketball player at Kentucky. And so he wouldn't have taken the job if he didn't know. And I think the only thing you can ask for as a head coach, do I have everything needed to compete at the highest level of college basketball? And Mark Pope certainly does. And so I think if you ask Mark Pope, I think he'd certainly take his situation over whoever, the school that is last in spending in the SEC. I don't know if that's Mississippi State or whoever. I'm no disrespect. I'm just stating it as a fact. And so I only bring it up because, yeah, there's more pressure. But I think Mark Pope understands that. I think Mark Pope accepts that. And I think Mark Pope would love his situation to the alternative, which is I don't have enough, but I'm still expected to compete at the highest level. And so the pressure is ramped up. I will say, I think whatever coach said that, listen, I think there's obviously a little bit of shade. I don't think it's factually incorrect, though, that there is certainly more pressure because I do think we all understand if you follow college basketball and if you're watching this pod in August, you certainly do, that Kentucky probably spent in the short conversation of most teams in college basketball. Now, we know the report was that they spent $20 million. I feel like Dr. Evil every time I say that. $20 million. I don't know if they spent $20 million, but they spent amongst the most in college basketball. We know North Carolina spent $14 million. And so to me, it's hard for me to get too upset, too worked up when you know how much they're spending. And I think to the coach's point, they are spending I don't think they're spending double maybe they are spending double what some SEC schools did. Spending triple and quadruple what certainly small schools have. So I don't think it's national championship or bust, but I do think the stakes are higher. I did find that quote very interesting. Another coach calling that team out and basically saying, yeah, you don't win it all. You got a lot of explaining to do. But again, I think Mark Pope understands that. And I think that's the reality of being the Kentucky basketball coach. And as I said, I don't think that he would trade that for anything else, any other opportunity, etc. etc. Iron Kentucky says, NIL is the new reality. Are we supposed to apologize for being the best at it? Producer Matt, you can include this on this Kentucky clip when you clip it off because it's a great question. And no, you shouldn't. And I love that attitude. I love the attitude of this is the new world. And Mark Pope has said it. Like, I haven't listened to the interview with Matt Norlander yet, but he said something about, we had the 3rd ranked schedule last year. I want to have the 1st ranked schedule because this is Kentucky. And he said that in his early summer media availability as well. He said, we want to have the best schedule. We want to have the most NIL. We want to have the biggest attendance. We want to play in the biggest games. We're freaking Kentucky. And by the way, it's the same in football at Texas and Ohio State. Listen, these are the schools. I'm just using them as an example. Michigan, Penn State, whoever. No need to apologize. Own it. We love college basketball more than you. Suck it up, Buttercup. Suck it up, whoever the coach is that said that, and deal with the fact that we ain't slowing down anytime soon, and we never will because we're Kentucky. And I think that applies to other schools as well. I think it applies to Carolina. I think UConn with Dan Hurley is going to get whatever they need in this new world of NIL to be competitive. St. John's, as long as Rick Pitino's there, going to do whatever they need. Duke, certainly with Jon Scheyer. So no, I love it. I love it. Great comment by Iron KY. Is there anything that Mark Pope hasn't done for Kentucky in the first year as coach that he could have done? To me, succeeded every single aspect of bringing Kentucky basketball back to the forefront. Darren, that's a great question. We could save that for a mailbag, but I will just say this really quick. The answer is basically no. Realistically, Final Four national championship are not happening in year one. It felt like those first-year coaches, there was a ceiling of the Sweet 16 or so. Dusty May at Michigan, Kevin Young at BYU, John Calipari at Arkansas, in addition to Mark Pope. The only complaint, and I think it's a little, I don't want to say it's nonsense, I just don't think it really matters, is the only complaint that I think people have is he hasn't landed that super marquee out-of-state 5-star high school prospect. But I think there's a lot of smart Kentucky fans and a lot of smart college basketball fans that realize 5 stars ain't what they used to be. And if you can get, if the choice is the 8th ranked player in the class who's not from your state, or, Mo Diabate, Rob Wright at BYU, Silas Demery at Connecticut, at UConn, Ian Jackson at St. John's. You take the dude who's been in college basketball. So I think that's the only argument that anybody could make. And I think it's mostly nonsense.